Today I want to focus on your emotional stability. And anyone who's ever experienced emotional trauma will be pretty familiar with this, that whereas normally going on we sort of feel that we can find our bottom emotion as low as we generally feel, it's very common for people who've experienced an emotional trauma to then find that where they thought their bottom was before, they can drop so much further. Those emotions just get so much more intense, so much deeper. What that has done is expanded that emotion range, that depth of despair, as it were. And even though we can go on perfectly normally, perfectly happy life, sometimes there can be small trigger points, little small triggers that then take us well below that depth, well beneath what used to be the base level, down into this pit of despair, of doom and gloom. And talk to anybody who's experienced such an emotional trauma, and it's common, it's a very, very common theme, that for so many people, they just experienced that where they thought it was maybe just a one-off traumatic event, suddenly they can drop back there very quickly. So how do we put that into action? What do we do? Well, in my role, I do come across a lot of people who are struggling. They've been perhaps in an environment where they needed to break free, they needed change, they needed a different environment. And it's all very well facilitating that change, but as professionals, we need to be fully aware that these people need ongoing support and guidance. There's a very good friend of mine who's a client, Nell, and then if you've watched any of my videos, you'll know all about Nell and her husband, Dell, who ended his life. And from my time working with Nell, it's very evident that it's not just helping through a situation. It's not just creating a plan, a vision, or ideal life and working towards that. It's far more than that. It's about support, guidance, encouragement, just knowing when to check in and when not to check in. Because once we're fully aware of how people's emotional cycle is starting to behave, of how quickly they can quickly drop down below that depth, that's the time that maybe they need support or guidance, just encouragement, and understanding that they're there at the moment, but they will come back. So imagine, if you will, the surface of a lake. Let's say it's frozen because it's a nice solid base, but we suffer an emotional trauma and we drop beneath that. We drop through the ice into the cold water, and you can almost feel that chill and cold, that pain, that hurt. But what we then understand as well is that where that ice break was, the ice is never going to be as thick as it was around everywhere else. So when sometimes the smallest of things will come to disrupt their lives, the ice is a lot more fragile. It's a lot easier for them to drop back into that suffering, that unhappiness, that depth. And that's what we've got to be really careful of. So the only work really from this is to just be mindful of anyone around you who've experienced severe emotional trauma. And remember that the ice under their feet is like to be a lot thinner than most other people. And it could sometimes be just the smallest of things that cause them to drop through the ice into the darkness. But as long as you're there nearby, you can help them back, support them, and enable them to carry on.